For 8 years, I lived my life believing I was the father of a beautiful little girl named Emily. From the moment I held her in my arms at the hospital, I knew my purpose in life had changed. Every late-night feeding, every diaper change, every lullaby whispered into the quiet of the night. I was there. Her first steps were toward me. Her first words were ones I taught her. Every scraped knee, every nightmare, every time she needed someone to hold her, I was the one she reached for. She was my daughter. But then everything changed. It started with little things. My wife, Lisa, had been distant for months, avoiding eye contact, dodging conversations. I assumed it was just the normal struggles of marriage. Work stress, exhaustion, the daily grind of life with a young child. I told myself it was a phase, something we'd work through. But the fight started soon after, small at first, then growing into full-blown arguments over the most trivial things. I couldn't understand what was happening. And then, one night, during one of our worst fights yet, she dropped a bombshell that shattered my world. "You're not even her real dad," she said, her voice laced with something I couldn't recognize at the time. Guilt, maybe? Or relief that she no longer had to keep the secret. I laughed, not because I found it funny, but because the idea itself was absurd. "What the hell are you talking about?" Lisa crossed her arms, her eyes cold and unyielding. "Emily isn't yours. She never was." The world seemed to tilt. My body went cold, and my heart pounded in my ears. "What do you mean?" My voice was barely a whisper. She sighed as if she were exhausted by the conversation already. "I had a one-night stand. Before we were married. I found out I was pregnant, and I knew there was a chance the baby wasn't yours. But I told myself it didn't matter. You wanted a family, and I let you believe she was yours because it was easier that way." I stood there, frozen, waiting for her to take it back, to say it was a lie. But the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. I wanted to scream, to break something, to demand why she had let me live a lie for 8 years. But all I could do was feel the air being sucked from my lungs. "Who else knows?" I finally managed to ask. Lisa hesitated. That hesitation told me the answer before she even spoke. "My parents. A few friends. I think deep down, they all assumed you knew too." The weight of humiliation crushed me. I had been the fool, the only one blind to the truth, the only one who thought he was a father when, in reality, I was just some stand-in. I didn't say another word. I went upstairs, packed a bag, and walked out of the house without looking back. Lisa didn't try to stop me. She didn't beg or plead. And that silence confirmed everything. I wasn't needed anymore. The hardest part was leaving Emily. She was asleep, curled up in her bed, blissfully unaware that her world was about to be turned upside down. I wanted to wake her up, to hold her one last time, to explain why I had to go. But I knew it would only hurt her more. So I walked away. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The pain didn't fade. If anything, it grew worse. Everywhere I turned, I saw reminders of her. The way she would giggle uncontrollably when I tickled her. The way she called for me in the middle of the night when she had a bad dream. The way she used to run into my arms the moment I walked through the front door. But she wasn't mine. She had never been mine. I drowned myself in work, in distractions, in anything that would keep me from thinking about her. I convinced myself I had done the right thing. I told myself she would be better off without me, that it was better to cut ties completely rather than stay in a life that had been built on lies. Then, almost a year later, Lisa called. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. I hadn't spoken to her since I left. I had no desire to hear her voice, no interest in whatever excuse or apology she might have. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe weakness, made me pick up. She sounded different, tired, worn down. "She misses you," she said, her voice unsteady. "She keeps asking why her daddy left." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "You were right to leave," she continued. "I was wrong, but she doesn't understand. She doesn't care about biology, about what happened between us. She just wants her dad back." I sat in silence, my mind a storm of emotions. Lisa sighed. I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but this isn't about me, it's about her. For months, I had told myself that I was doing the right thing, that leaving had been necessary, but the truth was, I had never stopped loving Emily. The pain of betrayal hadn't changed the fact that, in my heart, she was still my daughter. I made my decision that night. The next day, I drove back to the house I had once called home. I stood at the doorstep for what felt like an eternity before finally knocking. The door opened, and there she was. Emily. Her face lit up the moment she saw me. "Daddy!" she screamed, throwing herself into my arms. I held her tight, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Lisa stood behind her, watching, but I didn't look at her. This wasn't about her. It never had been. I had walked away once, believing I was doing the right thing. But now I knew the truth. Biology didn't make a father. Love did. And no matter what, I would always be Emily's dad.